In business school, we spend all this time learning the frameworks to build great companies. We study strategy, we study finance, marketing, all the tools you think you need to win the game. But what if, and this is the big question, what if we've been ignoring the game board itself? What if the very economic environment that we all take for granted is shifting in a way that makes all our old playbooks, well, totally obsolete? Today, we're going to dig into a massive 700-page economics book that I believe is the single most important business text of our time. Why? Because it completely redraws the map of the entire game board. So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to unpack this hidden rulebook. Then, we'll dive into the core formula that honestly changes everything. We'll put it under the microscope, see how it holds up to academic critique, and then watch how it plays out in the real world with two iconic companies. From there, we'll turn all this theory into an actual, actionable playbook for your career, and we'll finish up with a really crucial choice that every leader has to make. The book is Thomas Piketty's Capital in the 21st Century. Now, Piketty, he's not a consultant, he's not a CEO, he's a French academic who spent years crunching 2 centuries of tax data. So you're probably thinking, why on earth should we, as future business leaders, care about some dense historical economics book? Well, here's why it matters so much. This isn't just about some passing trend. Piketty's work is basically a macroeconomic forecast that radically alters everything, from how you should think about marketing to your HR strategy. It forces us to question our deepest assumptions about things like meritocracy and growth, and to ask ourselves, are we really ready to build companies for this new reality? Okay, so deep inside this massive 700-page book is one single, elegant, and, I have to say, pretty devastating formula. If you only remember one thing from our time together today, make it this.
R is greater than G. That's it. The average rate of return on capital is consistently greater than the rate of overall economic growth. Seems almost too simple, right? But trust me, the implications are absolutely explosive.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you've got R, the return on capital. Just think of it as the wealth you get from owning things, stocks, real estate, bonds, you name it. On the other side, you have G, economic growth. That's the income you get from doing things, your salary, your wages, the output of your work. Piketty's central argument, backed by a mountain of data, is that the R side of this equation almost always wins out. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because that world that many of us think of as normal, the one with a booming middle class, high growth, lots of opportunity, turns out it was a total historical anomaly, an exception, not the rule. For centuries, R was always bigger than G. It was only after the 2 world wars and the Great Depression basically destroyed huge amounts of concentrated capital that we saw this brief kind of golden era where wages actually grew faster. But since the 70s, we've snapped right back to what Piketty calls patrimonial capitalism, where owning stuff is once again way more profitable than doing stuff. And this creates this powerful, almost unstoppable feedback loop. When wealth from owning things compounds faster than income from working, the gap between people who have capital and people who don't just gets wider and wider, automatically. It really challenges our whole modern idea of a meritocracy. It suggests that in the long run, who your parents are might become more important than how hard you work, just like it was back in the Gilded Age. Okay, but as a professor, my job isn't to tell you what to think, it's to teach you how to think. So let's be good academics here and put this whole idea under the microscope. First off, the book's greatest strength, and you really can't argue with this, is the data. This is not just a theory. Piketty did the incredibly hard work of digging through centuries of tax records. But it's not perfect. Critics have some legit points. For one, his definition of capital is super broad. He lumps a productive factory in with a non-productive penthouse in Manhattan. Do those really behave the same way? Others question if that rate of return, R, is really as stable as he suggests, arguing that forces like technological disruption, creative disruption, can make old capital worthless. And finally, his big solution, a global wealth tax, is seen by just about everyone as politically impossible. And this leads to a really fascinating debate, a question I want you to think about. Is technology, what the economist Joseph Schumpeter famously called creative destruction, is that powerful enough to break this cycle? Or will new technologies like AI just become another tool for capital to get even further ahead? All right, enough with the theory. Let's see what this looks like on the ground, in the real world. Because if Piketty's right, we're not living in a single economy. We're living in what you could call a 2-track, or even a barbell economy.
Huge growth at the very top, high volume at the very bottom, and a completely hollowed out middle.
And you couldn't ask for two more perfect examples of the split than LVMH and JCPenney. One company basically became the king of the R world of capital, while the other got completely left behind in the shrinking G world of wages. So what was the genius of Bernard Arnault at LVMH? He realized way ahead of everyone else that his customers' wallets weren't tied to their paychecks, they were tied to their stock portfolios. He isn't really selling products, he's selling status, and that brand itself becomes a form of capital. So as his client's net worth compounds year after year, LVMH can raise its prices right along with it. In a way, LVMH is less of a retailer and more of a wealth management firm that just happens to sell handbags. It's a pure bet on R being greater than G.
And then you have JCPenney. I mean, their entire identity was built for a prosperous American middle class, the very heart of that G world. But what happens when that world starts to vanish? As inequality rose, their customers got squeezed. The ones doing better left for Nordstrom. The ones struggling left for Walmart and Amazon. JCPenney wasn't just a casualty of bad retail strategy. It was a casualty of economic polarization. Its target market literally evaporated from underneath it.
Okay, so let's bring this all home. Let's talk about you. How does this RG framework actually help you in your career? Because it's not just a theory, it is a practical playbook, and it has implications for every single one of us no matter what field you're in. All right, for all you future strategists and consultants, listen up. Your old market segmentation models, they're probably broken. You have to stop segmenting by income, which is a flow, and start segmenting by wealth, which is a stock. The mass affluent consumer and the high net worth individual are two completely different species. The biggest growth opportunities are now at the two extremes of that barbell, not in the mushy middle. And for the marketers, the message is even more blunt. The mass market is dead, gone. If you're a brand stuck in the middle, you are in a death spiral. You have to make a choice. You either go up, add a powerful brand story to justify a premium like Apple does, or you go down and ruthlessly engineer for the absolute lowest price like Amazon Basics. This idea of being a good value for the price, that's the most dangerous position in the market today. Now, for my finance folks, R explains so much of the weirdness you see in the markets, right? It's the reason the stock market, which is the world of R, can be soaring while the real economy of jobs and wages, the world of G, feels kind of meh. If you're going into investment management, your entire job is to live and breathe in the world of R, to use capital to generate returns that outpace everything else. And finally, for anyone going into leadership or HR, this might be the trickiest problem of all. You've got this fundamental tension. You're managing a G-world workforce that gets paid in salaries inside an R-world corporation that's valued on its equity. When your employees see their wages inch up by 3%, but the company's stock price doubles, well, that puts an incredible strain on your culture and their loyalty. The smartest leaders of tomorrow are going to have to figure out how to give every employee a real stake in R, a piece of the capital, not just a wage from G. So, at the end of the day, Piketty's book isn't your typical business how-to guide. It's what I'd call a context book. It is the socioeconomic map of the terrain that you are all about to enter as leaders. It shows you the path we've been on, and more importantly, it shows you where that path is headed. And that leaves you, with a huge choice. As the next generation of leaders, what's your role going to be in all of this? Is your job to simply master the rules of this RG world and maximize value for your shareholders? Or do you have a bigger responsibility to innovate, to create new kinds of business models that help build a more inclusive, more prosperous economy for all your stakeholders? That is the choice you'll face. And I'm very curious to see what you'll build.